I find the internal bargaining you do within yourself really interesting at the end of races. I really want to walk, but dear God, do I want to be done? If your effort is there and your wits are about, you haven't burned your biscuits already. I think you can kind of simmer down that pain to a level that says, I can manage this pain for the rest of the time.
Hey, Coach, what's happening?
Hey, welcome aboard.
With great links to get this going.
No, we have struggled, we have persevered. We are recording this on Sunday, January 12th, but for you listening in real time, it'll be January 13th, 2020, podcast 338.
Coming at you from the cold tundra of Wisconsin and the sweltery humidity.
Sweltering heat of Orlando, Florida. What's the temp right there in Beloit?
We're in the teens.
In the teens right now? It was not the teens this morning.
20s.
Yeah, 20s. But well, before we dive in, specifically, if it's your first time listening, we appreciate you joining us and giving us your time today. This is a triathlon-related podcast, but we do talk about all things life, training, how they intersect, how they intertwine, how they complement each other. And Mike and I both, as athletes and coaches, do our best to share our experiences as both, and hopefully have an open conversation with no sponsors, no ads, and just kind of go through what we're going through again as athletes ourselves and all kinds of endurance events. And today we'll talk about a specific event I did today with a bunch of our other athletes and my wife included. But yeah, we'll cover it all and all the mental, emotional, and physical things that go along with triathlon training, and hopefully you can take something of that's positive today and apply it to your training and your life that sets you up for success down the road.
Let's hope so, man.
Yeah. I just have to say, when you texted me and said that you had woken up from a nap, I was kind of pissed off.
Well, I thought you said you were taking one.
I know, man, but you're like you can nap. You're a serious napper. My wife is as well. She is a serious napper. She can fall asleep in like 2 seconds. We are. I think we talked about this on the previous podcast on 337. But we're down in Orlando, Florida, at Disney. We just finished, like as in like 5 hours ago, finished the Dopey challenge, which was a 4-day running event, 5K, 10K, half marathon, a full marathon, with insane wake-up calls, interesting challenges that go into it with the heat. We'll talk about that today. But yeah, she can, like the other, I think it was yesterday or something, she was like, I think I'm going to roll over and take a nap. And no kidding, in like 30 seconds, out cold. And I know from sharing hotel rooms with you when we travel to races and do things with our team, that you are very much the same. You're like, I think I'm gonna shut my eyes for a minute, and then I look over there, and you're like passed out in like the deepest of REM sleep possible.
Yeah,
I think,
quick ones.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's really
I
all you
don't
need.
go long, man.
I know it's power,
I
and
actually said to myself laying down today, I said, I really just like laying down and knowing that for the next 10 minutes, I can just check out.
I can, it is nice. I think I scored like a 30-minute nap. That's usually all I'm good for as well as a nice little power nap. But anyway, yeah, today won't be a super long podcast because again we literally just finished up this event, and then for the next 3 days, my wife and I are going to take kind of a little actual vacation that doesn't include running, and hang out here, and then before we head back to Chattanooga. But I think on the previous podcast we did, I think last Thursday, I think, we had discussed, and I think that I kind of talked about my goal and where I kind of want to go with this was I think I talked about on the podcast last week. It was that my only real goal for the race, because again, like when you think about a race that's 4 days in a row, you have a 5K, a 10K, half marathon, and a full marathon with insane wake up calls. It's just a really interesting event all in itself, in that the wake up calls are insanely earlier. Today our alarm was set and we woke up at 2:15 this morning. Uh, I know, I know. I woke up and I was like, I bet you could text Mike and get an immediate response. He's probably still awake right now. But it's
Pretty
just
close.
yeah, everything is just interesting about it, and with every race that we do, no matter what it is, if it's a running event, cycling, swimming, triathlon, whatever it is, every event has its own challenges, and that's different from how you kind of control your day-to-day life. And then with the combination of all the events together, kind of combined and sandwiched, obviously within 4 days in a row, it's up close to I think 49 to 50 miles of running in 4 days. That presents its own set of challenges, and then it was, I don't want to say it was unseasonably hot the last few days, but the humidity was very, very high, and that was something that I kind of mentioned to our athletes in an email preparing for this race, was that you not only needed to hydrate for the event that you're doing, but the humidity and the heat and your pacing is also going to really, really affect how you recover. And if you're doing all four, you need to really focus and dial in on taking your first 2 days specifically, just very, very relaxed and very easy. And then obviously focus on the recovery. And then today, and I'll talk about this kind of towards the later end of the podcast, but today they actually shortened the course towards the end of the day because it got up to, I think my Garmin registered 84 was the high on my Garmin, and then it was like 90% humidity. So I think towards the end of the race, I know that they actually did cut the event short for safety. And then as we were
You mean
leaving,
the race or the party?
well, I think for a lot of people, it was both. It was a race and a party, but they ended up, I think, cutting maybe 2.5 miles off the course. And when we finished the events, we were kind of walking back to the monorail. They had these, how you walk on the beach or whatever, and you see these the flags, green, yellow, red, whatever, and it kind of tells you how severe the conditions are. Well, they had, when we left today, the green, or not the green, the flag or the alert they had was red and said high alert, basically because the conditions were, I wouldn't consider them really, really oppressive. I mean, you and I used to do, if you've done Muncie or Ironman Chattanooga in the last few years, or you did Ironman Louisville, 1.0, you know what oppressive heat feels like. I mean, it's just like, it's suffocating. This was not it. It was not terribly hot in my opinion, but the humidity was challenging. And then I think when you combine that with the fact that most people, or a lot of people, come from out of state to compete in an event like this, you're going from, like, I think they interviewed a lady this morning who came from Wisconsin, and they were like, what was the weather like when you left? And she was like, oh, it was 1 degree. And then you're coming into 84. So things create things like that obviously create additional challenges. But um, a couple of things that I learned over the past few days was just the focus that you can have when you're strictly only dialed into your own personal effort and execution. Because again, like when you look at races and you look at 70.3s, Ironman events, marathons, things that, and we talk about this frequently on the podcast, is like every time we do a race, there are so many things that are out of your control. And I'm sure there are a lot of athletes that kind of go into this event, if you're doing all four, or any event, and they think, I want to hit these times, I want to hit, A, B, C, D goal times for these. And I think I said this on the podcast that I mentioned, was that I wanted a negative split the 5K, 10K, half marathon, and full marathon. Not negative split within the ones if I could, but most importantly, negative split the pace. And so in a 4-day event, I had to actually obviously think of that on the first day, in the 5K. How was I going to do that? And I learned a significant amount about how in touch I am with my body and how I know kind of my fatigue levels. But that's what I want to talk about today, is just the ability, how, I don't want to say how safe it feels, but I think knowing that you have control over your effort and your ability to execute, if you know yourself well and you can stick to it and stay patient, how that can affect, how it really kind of takes all the things that are uncontrollable, like the time of day you had to wake up, the race start, the 25,000 other people, the aid stations, the heat, the humidity, all those kind of things. They're there, but they don't really affect your outcome, because it's still up to you to still maintain effort and then maintain execution within the goal that you have. And that's something that you and I talk about a lot as both athletes and coaches with people we work with and on the podcast, is how when you go into races and you're swimming and you're cycling and you're running, you're doing these really long events, something is going to go bad. Something is going to go way off the rails, and you're going to have to choose, like, how do I react to this? But the main thing when you go into races is that, am I going to have a time goal? I think a lot of athletes have this. They have a pace in the swim, A lot of athletes have a watt range or a miles per hour on the bike that they just have to obsessively stick to. And then they have an ultimate, you've joked about this frequently. It's like, you hop on TriCalc and you put in your numbers and you're like, all right, I think I can do like a 5:30 today. And so everything drives you towards that 5:30. And the decisions that you make, the decisions that you don't make, and you basically take the day itself as it's either a success or a failure if I get this time. But I was texting with an athlete earlier asking how the day went. I said I found it actually more motivating for me specifically. This probably isn't the same way for everyone, but I found it more motivating for me to, as I was pushing like the last, as anyone's ever done a marathon knows, like the last 10 miles are just like, they're just painful. I mean, the last six are just incredibly painful, and you bargain with yourself the whole time. And I want to talk about that today too, is how you bargain with yourself in these events to walk or not walk, or to keep running or not keep running. But I found my biggest motivation came from, in order to just keep going, was the execution, and knowing that I had set out a goal of executing. It had nothing to do with my total time. It was just simple execution, and that's how the day ended up. And I thought those are a few points we could touch on today, if that's good with you.
Sure. Yeah, man. Did we? What? I gotta ask though. How they cut that short 2 miles?
Yeah, what they did was I think we were back in the room, or on the way back to our room in Alley, one of our athletes texted, and they texted us, said that they, I think, took out a out and back section with that
Oh,
at
so
the.
like in mid-course, some people
Exactly. Yeah, it was
finished.
mid-course. Yeah, so people were allowed to finish and go through the finishing chute. I don't think it might not even been 2 whole miles, but there was a section where you took a right, you went about a mile and a half to maybe even 2 miles in this park, and then you came back out and took another right. So you actually, all they did was basically cut off that right, and they just had you keep going straight. So they didn't cut the course off and shut people down. They just took 2 miles out of it and made the course a little bit shorter, but all the roads are so wide and it's so curvy. It is, every run that I did, I was over by like zero point 0.2 or zero point 0.4 miles, which is like, hey, I don't need any more extra mileage for this event. I'm not sure why we have to do this, but I think today I clocked 26.5 for the marathon, but five of those, the extra mileage is probably from my 5 porta potty stops.
Oh, so you got it in the whole Dopey challenge.
I did, yes, I did. I think a lot of people were a little bit short, but again, like the 5K, 10K, and half and full were all a little bit long. Um, but yeah, it
Oh,
was overall. I do have to say, before we get into like the nuts and bolts of kind of what I learned and how I would approach just events in general, to kind of take from the cast, was they do an excellent job here of putting on an event. I know you pay for it, just like anything, but if you're ever considering doing anything that they put on or Run Disney puts on, they pretty much, it's one of the best organized races I've ever been to. That's for sure. With like 30, I think 30 plus thousand people, and I think 70,000 over the course of the whole 4 days.
it's a big deal, man.
It
It's a
is.
big
It's a
one.
lot of it's a lot of people. Where do you mean to start?
I don't know. I'm just more fascinated by what are people doing like at night and stuff. Are you guys on campus there? Are you guys going out and
Campus. Yeah, it's actually just a Disney run dorm, and we all just kind of sit around in our compression socks and talk about, running, and the Nike shoes, and they really make you faster, and then what are you going to dress up as tomorrow? And but no, it's there are definitely a lot of runners here on site. Obviously, with 70,000 different people participating over 4 days, there's a lot of runners. Um, but it was early to bed. It was like, I mean, the first 3 days we did this event, I think we got up at 3:10 or 3:15 because the race started at 5:30. So this is definitely one of those events that, if you hadn't already crossed it off your list, Mike Torelli, you're crossing it off now.
it's long
Because
gone?
yeah, I know you crossed this off long ago.
But
Um,
even for different reasons.
I, yeah, I know this. Hey, don't
No,
start
I
hating, dude. Because
know, I
off
know.
the air after the last podcast, you were asking me about like the Avatar ride, and I was like, what? Who is this guy? What have you done with Mike Terrell asking me about rides at Disney? Um, but that was a unique challenge. I mean, obviously, Allie and I live in Chattanooga, so we're barely in the East Coast, but we're on Eastern time. But I can't imagine what it was like for the athletes that were on the West Coast. or even something different to come in and think, all right, the first 3 mornings for just something, as short as a 5K or 10K, you have to get up at 3:15 or 3:30 because you had to be there because they closed the roads, and so you had to be there because the roads they use for the race are also some of the roads they use for transportation. So you had to be there, or you were supposed to quote unquote be there by 4. And so, as you know, Ali very well, she is very much about adhering to all the rules and all the rule books. She was like, we got to be there. We got to do it. So we hopped on the monitor, made sure we were there. And then, so that was a unique challenge, was just kind of trying to get yourself to go to bed at a decent hour to feel okay when you wake up, have some coffee, and then head out the door. So you do the 5K the first day, come back. We kind of just relaxed the rest of the day. We didn't do any park days because who needs more walking mileage? Same thing for the 10K. Woke up and I'll just kind of go through run through. Like the 5K, we started out. I ended up with it's weird. Like you go out and do one of these events, and you kind of, again, like I talked about, have to shelve every bit of like expectation for like I guess it comes down to how you define racing, which I think is just an interesting word in general, like what your definition of it is and how you apply it to what you're actually doing. And for me, racing this meant not trying to race any specific one of the 5 events to go for any kind of a PR or anything like that, because I knew it was going to wreck me for the other 3. It was really just about how you were going to race the weekend itself. So the 5K, and I do have to give a big shout out to Mark Hagan, who's an athlete of ours. I ran with him for the majority of all 4 races until he dropped me like a bad habit with like 2 miles left in the marathon. Um, and it was definitely good to run with somebody else. But so for the 5K, you kind of line up, and it's interesting because you got 4 days and you don't know what the heat's going to be like. You don't know how your legs are going to be like. But we ended up doing 10:58s was our average for the 5K. Um, I do have to say, and I think you and I have talked about this on multiple occasions, and we've talked about it with our athletes, and we talked about in a couple previous podcasts, was that how different your stride is and your run form is when you're purposefully really trying to run slow, and how it's actually almost significantly more uncomfortable and almost, I don't want to say painful. I think uncomfortable is probably the best word to use for it. But just how uncomfortable it really is to run, like when you're really trying to run slow, it kind of hurts more. You know what I mean? Like I know
Oh,
we've
for
talked about this
sure,
before.
man.
Like we've had a lot of athletes mention this, and some of them that were here doing any of the 4 events were like, God, like it hurt to run that slow. And I guess not that slow, but slower than what you would go out and try to really, really run at. And that was one of the things I noticed with the 5K and the 10K was we did 10:58s for the 5K, and then the 10K again, like if you, as my goal specifically was to try and negative split all 4 races with basically just a faster pace over all 4. It was like, all right, I did 10:58s for the 5K. How do I want to approach the 10K? And for the next day, obviously, same thing. Wake up call, 3:30, get there a little bit longer. 6.2. I think it ended up being like 6.5. It's no short run, but it's something really long. And so the way that we approached that, Mark and I did, was just really, we ran fairly easy the first 3 or 4, just again kind of get your legs underneath, and then we kind of added in some pickups, just A, to wake the legs up for the next day, but B, because it was just getting really uncomfortable. And again, like I think we talk about this with our athletes, and I think a lot of people have asked about this before, like why do you have to run so slow, or what do you need to do? Well, the fact is that at some point at the end of your 70.3, at the end of your Ironman, at the end of your marathon or half marathon, whatever it is you're racing, you're going to have that run form because you just cannot run any faster.
Mm.
And it's important to build up that, as we talk about a lot, it's like you have to build up your chassis and your durability. And I think in all phases of what is your more than likely, or your best case scenario overall run form for the course of a marathon, an open marathon, or the marathon after biking 112 miles, or a half marathon, it's like at some point you're not going to be able to keep the same stride rate and run really, really hard. It's just going to be about getting your legs to turn over. Or if you're pacing yourself properly, it might feel like that in the beginning. And so that was one of the things I was reminded of early when we did that, was just the effect. I think I was actually more sore after the 10K than I was after the half. like sore, not sore as in like muscle sore, but like you're when you change up your stride and you change your perform so much to run a little bit slower, you're working different parts of your skeletal system and you're engaging different tendons and ligaments because your stride rate is maybe like for me when I try to run a lot slower, I think this is pretty common. I have like these really short kind of not almost like a shuffle, like kind of choppy steps
Yeah.
to kind of change things up, and the cadence is just so much different when you're doing that, which is great, especially when you're going to run long distances. It takes a little bit less pressure and pain, but it's just a totally different uncomfortable. But I think again, when you're looking at how you're going to change your gait and your run form and your stride up over the course of 4 days and four very different events, that it's actually good to kind of give your body that kind of a break that it's probably going to need, or really just disperse as evenly as you can over what's going to be 49 miles in 4 days over and not do the same stride the entire time. Because I think if I had done that, then it would have been a much more uncomfortable day today than it already was.
So 49 miles in 4 days, that's exactly 49 miles more than I've run in 4 days.
That's
Congratulations.
thanks.
Um,
I do what I can.
but in regard to that slower pace and the stride and all that sort of thing, because I always talk about how sometimes when you're running faster and you're not like sprinting, but running faster and you're nice and relaxed, sometimes it feels a heck of a lot easier. And
It does.
obviously, you know, being in shape to carry that for a long time is one story, but that's one of the things I always talk about when people are asking about running slow and
Hmm.
how to go about that. And for me, one of the biggest things is learning how to relax at that slow pace because I think you really put on a governor, and it's sort of like how do you run slow without a governor and not be thinking about it so much and purposely slowing the stride down and all that kind of stuff. So I really do practice trying to relax and go slow in a smooth way because you're right, man. That's what I mean. I think it sort of wears on your brain and your body and your tension levels too to really pull it back, so letting it go. And I don't necessarily know if there's a great answer to that, but I do think it's important to think about not thinking while you're going
No, and
slow.
it is like you had to find kind of like this meditative um like mantra with your cadence that was just like I need to be as fluid as I can and as quick as I can with my feet to disperse the impact in my body as much as I possibly can because I want to keep this as aerobic as I possibly can and I want to even things out. Like so like the way I always talk to athletes about cadence is I generally don't think you should change your cadence up that much because I think they can really mess it takes you out of focusing on a lot of things that you focus on already. But, run cadence, the impact that running has is so significant when you talk about how it's compared to swimming and cycling is that like you're covering like if you're covering a distance, X distance in four steps, four, strides as you run, or you're going to cover it in eight, the impact on your body is significantly different. If those the longer strides are again like it feels easier, but as you go on and if your stride stays the same, it also becomes more painful because the amount of force, the amount of energy you're having to use to cover the same distance with that fewer amount of strides means you're having to generate more power, more acceleration, quicker turnover rate while still carrying your legs a further distance and your body and how much you weigh versus it's kind of the difference in like do you want to lift 100 pounds four times or do you want to lift 50 pounds eight times? And as you look at like the duration of these long events, that's why a lot of people kind of shift towards that. Again, it's not really a shuffle, but you're kind of just like kind of again I guess you are kind of shuffling your feet to the highest cadence you possibly can to again like quicken up your cadence so you're dispersing that load and that impact over shorter strides, and it becomes easier for in my opinion, it becomes easier for your body to handle and absorb that impact over the course of the day. And I'll talk about this here in a little bit when I talk about the marathon, but that's something I had to do today even on the back half of the marathon was I alternated for like 6 miles. I alternated the stride that I wanted to have, to elongate its stride, really pushing it as much as I could push it at the end of a marathon in general. I had to alternate that stride and going for it with a very, very quick steps, because I found myself having to that little bit of a break that changed things up allowed my legs to almost kind of recover, like, because you're, again, like, you're having all that impact over the course of your regular stride and turnover, and then you change it up, and instead of covering, again, like, you're taking four strides, you're covering 15 feet, which is not, not reasonable, I don't think. Then you're doing 8 to cover the same thing. It just becomes easier, and I found that a lot easier today. But that was the challenge for the 10K, was kind of opening things up a little bit to kind of get our legs ready for the half. Um, the next day, again, we woke up, did the same exact thing, and the half was kind of the day where you kind of found out where your legs really are. What do you have today? Because you've ran 2 days before that, but it's been a 5K and a 10K. You're going to do more on this day than you did the previous days combined. And a half marathon is a significant distance, and that was also a challenge. Was kind of wrapping your mind back around. Okay, this isn't really just, I'm not really just kind of going out for a run. I can't really just kind of go out and do this. I need to get my mind right. I need to kind of dial things in and make sure my nutrition is on point, make sure I'm taking this seriously, because 13 miles is serious. It's not a walk in the park. You need to take this and be as smart as you can. And we did the half. We ended up with 9:39s, but I'm not gonna lie. Like a mile 8, I found myself thinking tomorrow's gonna really, really suck, and it's gonna suck bad, because we were descending, and we negative split the half marathon down to 9:39s. But as I was kind of opening up my legs and changing it up, I just didn't feel like I had it. I just feel like I had any turnover. I didn't have anything left, and I'm thinking, oh man, tomorrow, man, is going to really hurt. And I remember thinking, I don't say I got discouraged, but remember when I got down and finished with 9:39s, I was like, that's bad. Like, I actually thinking of like trying to execute the negative split, I actually thought about maybe I should walk the last half mile, like get that back up to like a
Oh,
9:50. To
but
kind of like give myself
yeah.
a little more, give myself a little more room.
Mm-hmm.
Because it came back like this morning when at like mile 4 or 5, I asked Mark, I was like, hey Mark, like, didn't we run like 9:50s yesterday? He's like, no, it was like 9:38. So I was like, oh my God. And when thinking about, because 10 seconds per minute mile is a big difference, of course, a marathon to try to hold. But so we ended up doing that. But I remember thinking, I finished that half, and my knees were creaky, because when you, again, like, one of the bigger challenges of this race not only is the wake up times and the distance and the heat and humidity, but it's pancake flat. I mean, it is pancake flat. I think over the course of all 4 days, I don't think we cracked like 300 feet of elevation gain, which is what I get in Chattanooga in like 4 miles. And I get that people love flat races because they think they're PR courses, but I hate them. I need, like, so whenever I saw like a ramp or something, I was actually excited to change. We talked about this so many times on about the course like they used to have in Louisville, was that it was just so flat with such long straightaway that you're running the same way the entire time. You're not changing up the focus of muscle groups. Anytime we got like a ramp or like a small bridge to go over, which in Florida is like there's not many of those, it was like I pushed it, because I was like, I really want to like change up the muscle groups, because just that the pounding and pounding and repetitiveness of just flat, 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 flat is just, it not only isn't monotonous, but it I think it wears and tears on you. Again, there's so many races out there, especially when you look at like 70.3 as an Ironman, that people gravitate towards because they're flat, or they're quote unquote beginner friendly, like Texas or Florida, Arizona. And I'm like, flat races have the same challenges that any other races do. And I know that people consider non-elevation as a positive, but if you're not prepared for it and you haven't trained on only flat, when you don't have the opportunity to change up your gait or the engage different muscle groups more than you are your quads, then it can become really challenging. And that was one of the things that stuck out to me yesterday was, man, this is like, I'm thinking like tomorrow, I'm going to crumble. I honestly thought that. I was like, I feel not great. I don't feel terrible, but finishing up the half marathon, I don't feel that great. And then knowing that
Where
I had
did you feel it, man?
in my
Like
body,
did, yeah, like
oh,
I'm
dude,
always
my
notorious for
knees.
the hamstring thing in the
See,
Ironman.
none of my, no, at no point did any of my like real like primary muscles tell me that I was in trouble. It was my knees and it was my feet.
Hmm.
My feet were, and again, I think that goes to, we talked about before, like the reason that doing hill work is so great is because you can engage all the muscle groups you want to get faster and do strength work, but you don't get the same pounding on your body. Because you're going uphill, you don't have the same impact. It's not the same force. You don't get that on the flat. And so my feet were just, I mean, crushing me. And I made I think one of the other smarter things I did this weekend to accomplish my goal was I wore three different pairs of shoes over the four races.
Hmm.
And they all had like different cushion, and the ones I wore for the half, I think, and that's one of the reason my feet started to hurt was they were my lightest shoe, and my like the least amount of cushion. But the two previous days, I had kind of over cushioned the shoes to kind of make it to where I could start the half feeling a little bit better than I maybe I could have. But it was all on my knees and my feet. That's what were just really really hurting. Were my feet and my knees. I remember like walking around after the half, and I remember I was mentioning Mark, and I was like, man, I want to say that I feel great, but I don't feel that awesome. I mean, it definitely felt better to pick it up the last half of that marathon or the half marathon, but I remember thinking, I don't feel that great. But then about 3 or 4 hours later, I thought, okay, it's only my feet and my knees that, they're kind of creaky and just don't feel awesome. It's not my quads or my hamstrings or my calves. And so I sat in the boots, we rolled out for a little bit, we went and ate, and I remember going to bed, and Alice said the same thing. She was like, I don't feel great, but I don't feel bad. And that was encouraging. But then the most daunting thing, and there's something I want to talk about here in a minute before we close, is just how we felt marathon day. But we went to bed, what I was say, yeah, last night, last night, I guess. And we were having dinner, and I was like, yeah, it's like 6 o'clock. I was like, we have to be awake in like 8 hours. Like to get up, like, just the fact that we were setting, like I set the coffee machine at 2:10, and it was like air. It should not use. This is way too early.
Wow.
And
Yeah, that's so Florida.
2:10.
Early dinner and
I know, right?
early
Yeah, like the
breakfast.
4 p.m. Like the
Setting
4
you up
p.m.
for the
Like yeah,
retirement, buddy.
that's right. We got to go hit the seafood buffet. We got to go to bingo. We got to hit up the Bridge Center. Um, but and I fully believe this, and I've said this to many of the athletes that we work with that just run. Um, that I think running an open marathon and racing it hard I think it's the hardest endurance event to do. Because it is a race. It is not, if you're racing it, like I didn't race this today, but people who go out and race, like trying to qualify for Boston, trying to PR, like if you go hard in a marathon, it just wrecks you. And we had a guy that we work with who did qualify for Boston 2 weeks ago, and I told him that he did like 3 Ironman last year, and I told him before the race, I said, listen, he was doing the Jacksonville Marathon, and I said, I'm just telling you this. I think racing, like doing that, like racing with the time goal, which is a unique circumstance in so many areas for thing at Boston, but running, it's so hard on you, and just to maintain those last 6 to 10 miles is so hard that you're gonna be wrecked. I think it's the hardest thing to pace and race all at the same time. And he texted me afterwards. He was like, "Dude, you're right. Racing that is so hard because it's just so painful. I think it's the impact. It's that it gets monotonous. You're doing the same thing over and over again. Um, and so we woke up, we set our alarm 2:10, get up, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm awake right now. But I stood up and I thought, I feel kind of good. I feel like oddly like really good. So I had my normal breakfast, we hydrated, went over there, got to the start line like 4:30. Met up with the rest of the team, and I'm thinking, man, this is an early day. The reason they obviously do it and they start early is because they want to get you out of the heat, before it gets really, really bad, and they don't want to take up like the roads and the parks so they can like keep making money. But we started off with the race, and I looked over Mark and I said, I think I want to start running off around 10:30s just to kind of see where we're at and kind of gauge ourselves. He's like, yeah, yeah, that sounds good. And I mean, I think half the time I think he was just trying to appease me to make sure I didn't like crumble and die. But we started off at 10:30s, and we both looked at each other, and it was interesting because a lot of our other athletes said this today, and Allie said the same thing to me when she got done, was at like mile 7 or 8, or again after mile 3, I looked at him and I was like, how do you feel? And he was like, I feel like almost too good. And so then you're thinking, oh my God, we got 23 miles left. We need to like slow it down. And then a couple more miles went, so we kind of just started kind of inching our way down. And like by mile 3, we're already running like close to 10s, 950s, and here we are trying to descend our way down to sub 938s for the day. And then at like mile 7, I was like, dude, I feel really good. He was like, I do too. It's kind of weird. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if I should trust this or not. But we kind of had this conversation. I thought, which again, because I had a couple athletes say, run blind tomorrow, and which I fully support that. But after the previous 3 days, I thought to myself, I gotta at least know where I'm starting at because I can't start off too fast. I need to kind of, and we talk about this frequently, is like the first like 6 to 8 miles, 10 miles even of a marathon, no matter what is open marathon, half marathon, end of a 70.3 or end of an Ironman, it's like you really need to use those first, like that first hour, really hour and 15 maybe, just to kind of figure out who you're going to be today. Like you don't want to make a decision at mile 1 and think I've got it today or I don't have it today. You just need to say, you know what? I, I'm just going to find out what kind of legs I have. And after running the half marathon the previous day, it was like, we just kind of need to figure out who we were today. And at like mile 8, I was like, dude, I feel really, really good. So we both decided to kind of like switch our watch off of pace and just go to time and just kind of run by feel and autopilot. And we went from there. And I think we ended up running the first half marathon at averaging like 9:35s. And we both looked at each other and said, I feel better right now than I did when we finished yesterday, which I think is fascinating. I don't
Mm.
I don't know, and Alex did the same thing. And I said, I don't really know the reasoning behind that. I don't know if it's because, because I think a lot of fatigue is also mental. When you're getting close to the end, so you kind of, I don't want to say you cave in or things change, but like when the half marathon is the end of the day, at like mile 10, you're like, I've only got 3 miles left. So I think you don't shut it down, but I think you do kind of, in a sense, your body fatigues in a way when you have the mentality if you're almost done, kind of step off the gas a little bit. And so I think today, when you're kind of psychologically thinking, I have another half marathon to do after this, I need to feel good. Body, you need to feel good. But I also think, and I've read a lot about this. There's a lot of online training programs that support this. Like Trainer Road has, I think, a lot of articles on this. It's called super compensation, to where you do a lot of sessions back to back to back to back. They promote a lot of intensity, but they call it super compensation, where you do back to back, really hard sessions, and your body keeps thinking, I have to go bigger and badder tomorrow. So I need to kind of just compensate more than I probably would have in terms of recovery and get ready to go again. And I think that has a lot to do with it, and also obviously you have to pace well. But we started there in 13, then we kind of just went on autopilot, and 17, 18 anyway, we finished up, I think, averaging. We actually negative split the marathon. We brought it home, and I think I ended up averaging 9:17s. I think he ended up averaging like 9:15 or 16 because, like I said, he dropped me like a bad habit at like mile 24. Um, but it was an incredible learning experience in that I found myself two things. I find the internal bargaining you do within yourself really interesting at the end of races. It's okay to walk right here. Hey, just walk it. You've already got it for the day. You can probably already meet. Just kind of walk it in. No, 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 no. Let's just keep going. No, no, let's run. No, let's walk. Nah, you can just find it. But because it feels so good to walk in, it was getting so hot that we actually walked every aid station from the first
Mm.
one and got water. But I found the bargaining that we did, and Allie was saying the same thing. She ran with two of our other athletes, Jason and Peter, and she was like, it was like anytime you get to like the last 6 or 8 miles, you just start bargaining. It's like, what does your mind want to do? What does your body want to do? I think everybody at that body, your body wants to, always kind of wants to walk. But then you're thinking, I really want to walk, but dear God, do I want to be done? I want to be done. I want this over with. And that's why I think that the marathon in general is so interesting, because I think you do get to a point to where your body as is at its max pain. And I think if you can get to a point to where your effort is still reasonably high, like you can give a reasonable effort to combat that pain, I think you can kind of numb it. Not numb it to like it's going to go away personally, but like, do you know what I'm trying to say here? Like, I think if your effort is there and your wits are about you haven't burned your biscuits already. I think you can kind of simmer down that pain to a level that says, I guess a better way to put it is, I can manage this pain for the rest of the time. It's not going to get any worse because it just can't. Because you can't physically run faster to make it worse.
Yeah, that's the
But
thing.
I think that's the thing, right? It's like I can't. You can't make it worse because you're physically incapable of actually making it worse. And I thought that was interesting. But then I also found with me specifically, and I think this is such a great, hopefully, is a really great lesson for other athletes that are going into any event, 5K, 10K, half marathon, whatever it is, sprint triathlon, Ironman, whatever, is that I found myself more internally motivated to keep running hard at the end of this that had nothing to do with my total time. Because I didn't have any time goals in general. My only goal was to execute. And so once I got down to like 9:24 average pace, I kept telling myself, all right, let's see how you feel when you drop it down to 9:23. Just keep going. All right, let's see. Then it went down to 9:22, and I was like, all right, let's see if we can get under 9:20. And like those small little kind of negotiations that I was having, but also like that motivating factor. Again, it was something that I could control because it was about my effort. I could either just maintain the effort that I had right then, which was all around 9 minute to just under 9 minute or right over at pace, or I could just mail it in because everyone I think at some point wants to mail it in over the course of a marathon. Everyone has that conversation of I think it's time to walk, and boy, it feels so good to walk, especially when you're walking aid stations and you feel how good it is. But I kept finding myself being more and more motivated to see how much more I could negative split and how low, because at mile like 17 or 18, I pulled back from time of day on my watch to average pace and lap pace. And so I kept having these like miniature races within mini goals within each mile to see, all right, can I keep going under, like if my pace was like nine, my average pace was like 9:25, I kept thinking, all right, if I keep pushing it to average like just over 9 or whatever, I can keep dropping this down. So that became my like mini goals for each mile, was just to maintain and raise that effort or keep it at that level so I can continue to see it drop. I had no idea what my overall time was going to be, but I just knew that if I kept doing that, I was going to keep executing what I wanted to do. And I think the last 5K or 10K was like my fastest of the whole weekend. And it had
Wow.
nothing to do with, I mean, it had something with fitness, obviously, but it was all because it was all based on patience, effort, and execution. It started on Thursday, ended on Sunday, and then. But I found it interesting because I think a lot of people are so motivated by time thresholds, and when you do events like this that are so unique, or you get yourself in any kind of race situation that you do have so many uncontrollables, is that when you basically take the uncontrollables almost out of the equation because they just are what they are, because you yourself as an athlete, no matter what event you're doing, can set up or set aside how your effort is always the one thing you can do no matter what. You can always try hard, you can always do your best, you can always be patient, you can always focus on specific things, and then that's a effort. And then execution is like, okay, this is what I want to do. I have to know myself. I have to know what I'm capable of. I do have to take into account the uncontrollables. The temperature, the humidity, the back to back to back days of running, the early wake ups, like all those things you have to take into account, all the uncontrollables you have to take into account. But then it's how you apply them to the things that you yourself can control, like your execution. And that is what I learned the most in me specifically, was that how I was able to take those and just say, all right, heat, humidity, early wake ups, back to back days of running, set yourself up and know your body, know what you think it can do and how it's supposed to feel, and respect that and honor that, and then pace yourself accordingly, and then see where you end up. And doing that allowed me to end up doing what my original goal was. And I found it more satisfying to have the effort the whole time and execute, because I honestly don't think that if I didn't have that goal, or I didn't even say that goal out loud, maybe, of like executing that negative split over 4 days, I don't think I would have dug as deep as I ultimately had. I mean, I dug as deep as I've dug in a long time the last 6-10 miles of this race today, but I don't think I would have, um, because when you have these time goals that are separated by seconds or minutes, that once you kind of see that goal vanish, now what are you motivated to do? Your goal is gone. It could be gone at mile 60 of the bike. It could be gone after the swim. It could be, I mean, you talked about this at Wisconsin, I think. It's like some people it's gone after the swim. And so for not having that goal of you can't do this or it's already gone, you allowed the focus of your day to be something that can continue on with you from the first mile of the 5K all the way through the last mile of the marathon. And
Yeah.
I found I found it energizing. I found it incredibly motivating, and I found it surprisingly very incredibly satisfying to know that I can control those two things, and I controlled them, and I did my best, and the time was what it was, but I executed, and I learned a lot about myself. And again, I think when you use those kind of things and those kind of um, mini goals that are based around things you can control, I think you set yourself up for success.
Hmm. Well, what I heard you saying there, and I know we got to end it, but you were you pretty much bit off small pieces all weekend. You kind of had your strategy and you had your goals within it, and like you said, you were almost breaking it going into triathlon and like what you're just talking about, like how my goal was gone after the swim. If I had thought of that in terms of like, okay, what is my goal for the swim, effort and execution wise versus time wise? So more of
Right.
a let's get out there, find your spot, and then maybe on the back for a while, go after it, blah, blah, blah. On the bike, pick certain parts of the course where you can handle it and maybe recover in some areas and whatever and things like that. And then do the, like what you're talking about in the marathon, where you just sort of, break it down into smaller pieces and have goals within those pieces and sort of let the rest lay where it may, instead
Hmm.
of trying to jump in the water with a overall goal for the whole day, because you could be putting yourself way behind the eight ball, but you could be underestimating yourself too. And you talk,
Exactly.
so I think it really does kind of boil down to approaching these races with, the, the effort, the execution that you know that you can handle, or at least it kind of gives you sort of mini goals within too that keep you focused and keep you like, all right, well, I only have this and this is what I want to give, and then you kind of regroup and go back to the next thing. So
Yeah, you just got to give
anyway,
yourself a shot.
yeah, um, I just quickly I was at, obviously my father's funeral was on Friday. It went very well. It was a very moving experience for me, and great turnout, and it just reminded me, how many friends he had, everything like that. So that was good. I don't want to, but one of the people I met there was a guy that I guess knew. Uh, him kind of, and really through he was now he's dating a friend of my mom's, and so he
Hmm.
was there and we talked for a little bit. He told me, yeah, I used to run at Michigan State
Oh,
cross country, and it's 1971 he ran the Boston Marathon. And I said, what do
whoa.
like what were you running, what was going on back then? He goes, yeah, I think I ran 2:18. and and he didn't seem like he was bullshitting kind of guy. He really
Yeah.
didn't want to talk about it much. I said, what one? He goes, I don't really know him. Maybe like 210 or something like that or whatever. But I was just now he's a huge cyclist. He doesn't run a lot, but like it just amazes me because I don't think that's one of those things where those cats in the 70s, 60s,
I
and
know,
70s were
right?
throwing down, and that really hasn't. I mean, I don't know what the record for Boston is, but it's obviously not under 2 hours.
No, it's probably like in the
So
204, 205 range.
yeah, so I don't know. I
Makes all
want to catch
kinds,
up.
man. All shapes, all sizes, all ages, and that was never been more apparent than this weekend. I think that's why endurance sports are so great. Like it's a competition, but it's a competition with yourself. I think that's what opens it up to so many people being able to come to like, one event, a running event, a triathlon or whatever, and and go out and do the best they can and still learn a lot and still feel like they did really well in a sea of, what was 70 other thousand people this weekend.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you pulled it off, man. It sounds. I was gonna say it sounds like a good time. I don't know. Maybe the Triple T is next on your agenda.
No, Triple T is not on my agenda. No, and then actually, listen, the biggest endurance event right now I have is trying to wobble my way over to the restaurant that's like 300 feet away, um, in less than 20 minutes. That's basically how I'm feeling right now. It's like the total wobble to get around, like, that feeling. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like you're just so sore and uncomfortable. That's my next endurance goal.
All right, man. Well, you'll get some good walking in the next few days, I bet.
Yes, I will. And
Good
hey,
recovery.
we will. And we appreciate you tuning in and joining us. If you haven't been, stop by, visit us, C26Triathlon.com. Is our one-stop shop for all things that we do, all the information that you need. Stop by, check it out, click on it, and investigate it thoroughly. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions for me specifically, C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Enjoy the celebration with
All right,
everybody.
dude. I'll talk to
All
you
right.
later.
See you, man. Bye-bye.
Amen.